Hi everyone, it's Aga from EurocaCrystalBeads.com and I'm here with another fun beading tutorial for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you always know when we're posting new content. In today's video, we're going to be doing bead embroidery again. This is going to be a super simple pendant. We're going to be doing a peyote bezel around this amazing, look at how it sparkles, amazing Krakovski crystal. This is an oval that is 13 millimeters long, and we're going to be encasing it in seed beads, and we're going to be doing a beautiful but very simple soft royal setting for it, and we're going to be using seed beads. Here I have 11 no Miyuki seed beads, but TOHO will be fine as well. And in the same color, I have 15 O's. I also have 8 O's, and these are TOHOs, but I'm not going to use it yet. I also have lovely Krakovski pearls, and these are in the color white. And when it comes to beads, that's all you need. When it comes to other supplies and tools, I'm going to be using beading foundation. Here I have Beadsmith beading foundation. You can also use Lacy Stiff Stuff or the felt beading foundations that we have from Good Felt. We're also going to need a needle, and I'll be using 12 size needle, 11 or 10 will work as well. And we're going to need some thread. Here I have 1G. You can condition it before using it by running it through wax, but I'm not going to be doing that because we're not going to be putting it under very much stress. You're also going to need something for the back. Here I have ultrasuede in this lovely color, but we also have different colors that will also match. For the glue, I'll be using E6000. I'm also going to be using a lighter to melt the end of my thread because I don't like tying knots. And I'm going to be using some scissors to cut off the foundation, the ultrasuede, and my thread. Also, you don't need it like necessarily, but I'm going to show you how to use a pencil to make sure that your rows are even. Okay, let's start. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the stone into the backing. So this is going to be looking quite nice in the bezel. You can also use a smaller or a bigger one. These are really easy to bezel around, they don't have any angles. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set it and glue it to the foundation. Now, since it is a little bit of a point back, I'm going to use an extra layer of foundation around the edge to make it kind of protrude more evenly, so to speak, above the foundation. So what I need to do is I need to cut off like a bit of foundation to cover the back of the stone. Like that, just like a bit. And now in the middle of it, I'm gonna make a hole. If you've watched my previous video on bead embroidery, the rainbow reflection video, you will know what I'm doing right now. So I'm just kind of cutting a hole so that the stone has like some space for that pointed back to rest against. And I'm gonna glue it on this, then wait for the glue to dry a little bit. I'm gonna cut around it, and then I'm going to actually glue it on the piece of foundation that's gonna be my pendant. Now the hole still needs to be bigger because I want the edge of the stone to lay sort of flat against the foundation. Alright, so this is more or less it. It's a little bit more difficult with oval stones because their backs are not as pointed, basically, as, for example, Rivoli. So here I have an orange stick and my glue. And I'm basically just going to distribute some of that glue around the edge of my stone. Right, you don't have to be exact because, again, we just want it to stick to the foundation so that we can bezel around it, and eventually it's the beads that's going to keep it on the pendant And I'm just kind of pushing it, making sure it's more or less in the center. And I'm kind of pushing this foundation against the edge of that stone. Alright, so this is where I am. This is how it is looking from the side. I'm just going to wait like maybe 20 minutes before I come back. Cut it off gently, or maybe half an hour. And I'm gonna cut it off along the edge and glue this to the foundation. Only to wait again. I mean, this is a time-consuming process if you think about it, but it's very easy at the end, and it's going to be very pretty. Okay, so the glue has dried a little bit, and I can cut off the excess foundation so that I can glue this stone to my actual foundation and start embroidering. Now, I cut it from the back because I can feel like the stone with my scissors here. And I just cut loosely around the edges. You can cut a little bit too far first, because you can always cut more. So it looks kind of like a donut around it. As you can see, there's still plenty visible, so I can cut off a little bit more. Be careful not to scrape the edge of the stone with your scissors as you go. Okay, so this should be more or less enough. As you can see, the foundation is about on the same level as the stone. It can be like a tiny bit protruding outside the edge of the stone, but that will be okay because that will make our bezel like more rounded and not like going from underneath the stone. That's another reason why you need this extra layer, because if you just glued it to the foundation like this with nothing in between, you can get your beads kind of lost in between the stone and the foundation, so they will get just kind of, they will fall into that little crevice. Okay, now I'm gonna assess how much foundation I need. So I'm just gonna eyeball it, but I'm going to make sure that I can fit like my bezel and then a pearl and then another row of beads like on the edge. So this should be enough because we're going to be just going in circles, or rather in ovals, around the stone. So this should be enough. So I will cut off the rest and cut out a rectangle, sort of like this. I'm not gluing anything yet. I'm gonna glue it in a second. I'm cutting it with a little bit of a margin. To be safe, this is probably more than I will need, because there will be like roughly the bezel, the pearls, and one more row. And this is almost flat on this foundation. As you can see, there's still some kind of movement here. So if I want to be super like flat, at least on this side, I'm gonna cut off a tiny little slit in my foundation so that the back of my stone can have somewhere to go in over here. So I just measured, and this is not even half an inch of this slit. And again, I can feel it on the back with my fingers. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some glue on the back of my stone here. And again, I'm just squeezing it, and then I'll wait at least half an hour to start doing my peyote bezel, and that's where I will meet you. Alright, now the glue has dried more or less. It's time to start the bezel that I'm going to be doing with a round miyuki, starting with 11 O's, and then we're going to close it up with 15 O's. So I'm going to come out with my needle, and by the way, I already put on some thread. That's about a wingspan. I made a tiny little ball of melted thread at the end, and I'll be coming out of here. Now, if you know how to do a peyote bezel, then this is nothing new to you, but I'm going to show it quickly anyway. So I'm picking up two 11 O's, putting them down on my beading foundation, roughly 2 beads away. You can also slide them down your thread to see how much space they take. And now I'm going in between them and going through that second one. Now I'm picking up another two and doing the same forward until I've made a full circle. Okay, now that's the last pair for me here. And I'm joining the last bead with the first bead over here. And I'm coming out of that first bead that I added. Now, why I go in pairs as opposed to, like in other videos, in more beads, like going in with 6 and back by 4 or things like this. I go by pairs because if you add 2 beads and then come back through the second one, then the second bead is going to be attached to the foundation on both sides, and the first one will not be attached like from the front, or actually from the back if you think about it as you go around. So with peyote, this is going to be lifted a little bit, this one bead. So that second bead is going to be sitting firmly on the foundation, while that first one will be free to kind of get lifted a little bit. You will see that especially in the next pair of beads, and this is lifted kind of easily, and so the shape of the peyote overall is going to be just a lot nicer if you go in pairs and just attach the second bead. So that's like a pro tip for a super aesthetically looking bezel if you're doing bead embroidery. And now, if you don't manage to get a full, even count of beads around, and you end up only having space for one bead over here, then I suggest going back several pairs and either crowding them a little bit more tightly together, or spacing them a little bit if you've been crowding them quite much before. So you either get them a little tighter or give them a little bit more space so that in the end they turn out even. And that usually works. In my case, in here, that's 19 pairs of 11-ohs around this particular stone, but you may have fewer or more depending on how you cut that foundation that we added as an extra layer. So don't worry if you have more or fewer than 19 pairs of beads. Anyway, let's go in with the second row. So I'm picking up one 11-oh and I'm just skipping one bead and coming into that next bead, the one that doesn't have any attachments to the foundation. So that's gonna be this one. And I already love this combination of gold and this baby pink. Now I'm skipping one bead and going in through the next one. And again, I'm just going to do it all around until I've reached that very first bead that I added in this bezel. Okay, now that's this last bead in the second row, and I'm going back through that first bead of the first row and that first bead of the second row. Now we're going to do a third row in the same way, so I'm adding a single 11-oh in between the 11-ohs from the previous row. Now it's easy because they're the ones sticking up. Okay, that was the last bead in this row. I stepped up through that first bead of the last row, and now I'm going to come in with 15-ohs, picking up one, and just like before, adding between the beads from the previous row. Already at this point, we're going to be closing this up. So feel free to pull a little bit from time to time, just not too hard because it may break, because 1G is not all that tough. If you condition it first, it's going to be obviously a little better, but just be careful not to ruin your work at this point and have to start over again. Although Miyuki beads are not known for sharp edges, so it should be absolutely fine. Okay, now the last bead in this row, and stepping up to that row above, pulling a little bit, and now I'm going to go through all of the beads in this final row that is the 11 nose and the 15 nose all over again, just to make it a little bit more tight and sturdy, so that even if the glue fails us one day, the beads will hold the stone in place. Okay, now we're done with the bezeling. You can pull that last time so that it's nice and tight. I'm just going to go down with my thread through the beads kind of diagonally so that I'm at the bottom. I'm stepping down through each row until I'm coming out of that a bead in that first row, and I'm gonna go through my foundation. Now after I'm back here in the back, I'm just going to tie a knot and finish this thread here because it's quite tired and not long enough. Now as you can see, I already did two things. I put some new thread on my needle and I drew this sort of a guide line around my bezel so that I know where to go in with my needle. I'm going to be adding 1 15-0 and 1 pearl for each sequence. You can slide that down to see where it ends. And this is where I'm gonna put in my needle, more or less. And I'm gonna go back only through that pearl. So we're adding 2 beads and coming back through one. Through that foundation. And I'm going back through just the pearl. And now I'm going through the pearl and not through the entire sequence here, because I actually want the 15-0s to kind of hang in there in the air. I don't want them to be pinned down to the foundation. I want them to be kind of right in between the pearls. So this is what I'm doing. In this way, they're not attached, except that first one. They're not attached to the foundation in any way. So they can just like float in between the pearls. Now, an important thing to remember, especially around these bends around here, is that you rather want to space them more loosely and further apart than to squeeze them together. And this is going to be important for the next step, because we're still going to be working with this same row. So you want to space them a little bit more apart rather than packed tightly together and more crowded. So when I pull it down, slide it down my thread and see that it's somewhere around here, I might even want to go like a millimeter, like a tiny little bit further away. And we want to leave these 15-0s a little bit more loose and give them some space. Now to close that circle, I went through that first 15-0 and that pearl. Now I'm gonna go to the back. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding some additional texture to the whole thing. So I'm coming out to the front, like in between this 15-0 and the bezel. This is where I am. And so what I'll be doing now is I'm going to be picking up 6 15-0s. If you're using TOHOs, 5 might actually be okay due to the difference in their shape. So I've picked up 6 15-0s, and I'm actually going to go around and above this 15-0 in between the pearls to make a kind of an arch with these 15-0s here. And I go in underneath the 15-0 over there, not exactly next to it, but slightly underneath it. And this is what it will look like. Then on to the next one. And I'm going slightly underneath this 15-0 here. This is also why I told you to space the pearls rather loosely and far away rather than crowded together, because at this point, if they were too tightly packed in this row, they will get kind of moved around and the oval wouldn't be as even as it can. Okay, so I'm going to be continuing that step all around, all between my pearls until I've made a full circle. And the last one. There, isn't it just so pretty? Okay, I'll just finish this thread, add a new one, and I'll come back to you with a final bead embroidery row. So I have some fresh thread on my needle, and I'm going to go through the foundation around in here. And now this is way simpler than a backstitch, and it's going to take way less time. So what I do is I pick up 2 15-0s, 1 11-0, and 2 more 15-0s. And I'm going in on the other side, like right next to that 15-0 in this kind of bead arch in between the pearls. And what you're left with is this sort of decoration. Now if we go forward, so I'm adding another one in over here, 2 15-0s, 1 11-0, 2 15-0s, and coming to the back over here, you can correct it so that the 11-0 is more or less in the center, and if you pull it, the pearl is going to kind of line up more towards the center. So it kind of makes everything even tighter together. Next one. And now this is how in 5 to 10 minutes you'll get this, which looks really, really, really nice. Now I'm going to cut off this thread, I'll tie a knot and finish it, and it's going to be time to cut off the excess foundation and finish the piece. Now, because we didn't secure any of this, like these central 11-0s, what we have here is a pretty much round shape. So I'm going to cut off the excess foundation, just making sure that I'm not cutting any of the beads. Actually, let's start from the front. It's a safe distance here. And this is a step that you may want to do slowly to make sure that you're not cutting in between any of the beads, so that you're not cutting any of the thread. Now where I want to be is maybe a little bit more close to here. So I'm just sliding my scissors over here, and now I can see better where the beads are so that I know I'm not cutting through the thread right there. Okay, so I cut as close as I possibly and comfortably could to the threads in the back. This is what we have. And now let's attach this pendant to be to our back. So we're going to be using ultrasuede. And what I do is I just put some of that glue on the back of my pendant, and I'm going to spread it with my stick, leaving a bit of a margin around so that it's easier for my needle to go through all the layers when there's no glue. Remember to do it in a thin layer because we don't want anything to seep through the ultrasuede. Like that. You don't have to be exact. As I always say, we're going to sew this all together. Okay, now a little bit of squeezing. I'll wait about an hour and come back to you to show you a nice way to finish a bead embroidery edge. Alright, now it's time to cut off this excess foundation. I'm just gonna roughly cut it first. And now looking from the front and a little bit from the side, I'm trimming it so that it's more or less even with the edge of my beading foundation. Now I'm gonna add new thread, and you need fresh thread for that because it's going to be visible between the beads. So I want to have fresh thread. You can condition it if you want. And you're not going to need too much, but I'm going to use slightly more than half a wingspan to make sure that I have enough to go around and make a tiny beaded veil. Right, I made a little melted ball, and I'm going to start from the top, and this is actually a perfect spot because this is exactly in the middle. I'm in between these two pearls, whereas on the other side it's a little bit unclear. So I'm going to go over here, and as per the usual, I go in between all the layers and I make sure I'm on one of the sides of this kind of central point. So I want to go out through the foundation around here. So like this is on one side of this central point. Now I'm going to be using 8 O's. So let me just... Right, so we're going to be adding a little bit more color to the pendant. And we're going to be doing it in a really nice way. Right here, at the top, in the middle, this is where I'm going to be making my beaded veil. So I want two 11-0 beads over here so that I can use them to start the beaded veil. So I start with these two 11-0s and I want to place them right in the center. I'm going to be doing the edge looking from the back and going like towards the hand with the needle, so to speak. So if you're right-handed, you go right. But you can also go left if that's more comfortable for you. Anyway, I'm going through all the layers roughly 2 beads away or on the other side of the central point of my pendant. And I'm going up through that second bead. Alright, so this is going to be like a basis for our beaded veil that is going to be around here. And now on the edge, I'm going to be using rig stitch, but I'm going to alternate between 8 O's and 15 O's and 11 O's. On this more curved side of the oval, I'm going to put in 15 O's in between the 11 O's, and as soon as I reach this kind of less curved side of the oval, I'm gonna put in 11 O's because they're slightly larger and this is going to look more smooth. So now I'm going to be putting 15 because as you can see in the front, we're already above that arch made out of 15 in between those pearls. So I go through all the layers and come out right next to these 15 here and up through that 15. Now an 80 because we're about to be next to a pearl. So that's where I come out with my needle right next to that pearl. Now you can see how far it is until we're next to these 15 here. So this is where I'm going to start adding 11. Now an 80. And that's just what I'm going to continue to be doing until I've added this brick stitch edge to the entire pendant. And I'm going to come back to you when it's time to do a simple bail. Okay, now that part's done. As you can see, these beads are pretty spaced out. And I really like the effect that the thread gives us. Like it makes this wave kind of lined out. And now I'm just going to connect this last 80 with one of the first 11 here. So these are the two original first 11 that are in this row. So I'm just going down that first one as if I was just adding it. I'm going through all the layers to the front and up through that bead. Now I've been thinking what kind of a bail would fit this kind of pendant best. And if you want, you can just attach a metal bail. I'm just going to be making a very, very, very simple beaded bail. Like I'm just going to make 2 loops over here and they're going to look really nice. For example, on a regular chain, I have some chain over here. So all I need to do is pick up some beads, make 2 loops, and I'll be set with my pendant. Let's see how many beads we will need. Okay, so that's 15. Let's see if that amount is good. I'm just going in right through that first bead. And I want to be coming out of this bead and through none of the layers at this point. Yeah, that's going to be enough. If you know already what kind of clasp you're going to be using, just make sure that your clasp will fit through that loop so you don't have to first pull the chain through and only then attach a clasp, and so that you can exchange different chains and cords depending on the outfit or the day. I'm going to thread 15 more 11 now. That's 15 more 11 and I'm going through this bead, but this time I'm just going to go right through that backing here. So that I can go right back up this bead and again through that loop so that it doesn't get loose as I wear it. Now I'm actually going to connect these 2 over here, which is going from one to the other to prevent them from twisting, and because I want them to kind of be in a V, so this is going to help them. In here as well, I just reach that last bead in the loop, and I'm going to go right back up again through that other loop of beads. Now we've been 3 times through this loop and only 2 times through the other. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back up and through all of these beads in this other loop. This time I'm going back up through the bead in the brick stitch edge. Now I'm just going to go through this brick stitch edge bead for a final time, and I'm gonna go through to the front in between the pearl and the next bead, and I'm going to just go through the pearl and under that bead arch over here in order to tie a knot. So I'm just going under the thread that's in between these beads, in between the pearl and the 15 that's in between the pearl and the next pearl. So I'm just making a loop, going through it, making another loop, going through that one, and tying it all up. And I'm going to hide the thread in several more beads. I can cut off my thread now. Alright, now that's the pendant. As I said, I think a chain will look really nice with it because it kind of reflects like the gold and metallic style of the beads. So this is probably how I'm going to wear it. This is what it looks like from the back. And that would be it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will make this wonderful pendant with a Krakovski crystal or elite crystal, because we're going to have some beautiful oval shapes. We probably already have them as you are watching this now. So please share if you make these. Share in an email or on our Facebook or in our different media or in our Facebook group if you want. We have a Facebook group. It will be linked down below, just like all of the materials that I've shown you today that you can get at eureka-crystalbeads.com. They will be also linked down in the description. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one and on our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Bye!